Getting developed abs is probably one of the most common training goals I come across in my practice as a personal trainer. So it's also common for people to spend a lot of time and energy on doing all kinds of ab exercises, but this may not always have the effect you desire. When it comes to having visible and well-developed abs, there are two primary considerations. First, your underlying abdominal muscles of course need to be developed so there is a good amount of muscle around your midsection that pops out. Secondly, you need a body fat percentage that is low enough for your abs to actually showcase, and this is the most important variable. While you may strengthen your abs a bit with direct abdominal work, this won't help you burn the fat around the stomach region. I just want to preface this video with this fact because you guys know that I give it to you straight. The abdominal training techniques that I will show you in this video will help develop your abs, but it won't necessarily make your midsection look more defined. A leaner midsection requires fat loss, and I have other videos on that. What we will look into in this video is how you can properly train your abs so that you can benefit from a stronger core in everyday activities and in your training. At the end of this video, you will also get a practical abs training example that you can apply in your workouts right away. First, let's define what the core actually is, because oftentimes when we speak about the core muscles, we tend to think about just the abdominal muscles. But the core actually refers to all muscles that stabilize the torso, so any muscle on your torso is part of your core, including your spinal erectors and back muscles. We will focus the tips in this video on one vital part of your core, and that is the abdominal musculature. The abdominal muscles arguably play the most important role in the stabilization of your core, so you will also often notice that strengthening your abs will have direct benefits to stability in your training. As I discussed in one of my previous videos on ab training, there are three main abdominal muscles that we want to target when abs training is the goal. We have the rectus abdominis, also known as the blocky six-pack muscle. Then we have the obliques, which are located on the side of your core. And we have the transverse abdominis, which is a deep underlying muscular sheath around the abdominal wall. If we want to train for balanced abdominal development and strength, then we need to make sure that we properly hit all three regions of the abs. And this starts with understanding how you can actually train these different regions. If we want to target mostly the rectus abdominis, we need to train spinal flexion movements like different crunch or leg raise variations. The obliques assist in rotation, so when you rotate your torso or raise the legs up in a diagonal way against resistance, the obliques will be active. And lastly, the transverse abdominis is active in flexion, rotation, and abdominal stabilization movements. The transverse abdominis stabilizes the spine, so it will act in all abdominal exercises. Since abdominal training will almost always involve some form of bodyweight training or having increased body control, not all abdominal exercises will work for everyone. For instance, if you struggle with stabilizing yourself on hanging leg raises, it's better to start with a more simple abdominal exercise that trains the same movement pattern, so you can work yourself up to doing hanging leg raises. To help you more effectively train your abs, I will provide a 4-step progression model that you can use in your training to train each fundamental movement pattern for training your core. There are three main functions we want to train in your abdominal training. That's flexion, rotation, and stabilization. For every function, I will provide 4 levels, and you can decide at which level to start based on your current fitness advancement. Starting with flexion exercises, and this will mostly target the rectus abdominis. The first level in the abdominal flexion movement pattern is a simple lying knee raise. As you raise your knees towards your chest, let your hips come off the floor a little bit so that the pelvis lifts up and the spine flexes for a good abdominal contraction. Once you're able to get a clean 12 reps on knee raises, you can transition to doing lying leg raises, in which you raise your legs while they are extended instead of the knees being bent. Once you get 12 reps on the lying leg raises too, it's time to level up things and perform a hanging leg raise. This is a less stable exercise, so your abs will be challenged to a greater extent. And you also get the bonus of being able to train your grip strength. And lastly, if you're able to get 12 hanging leg raises, it's time to move into a weighted abdominal exercise that you can progressively overload long term. I personally like using the cable ab pull down since it allows you to more practically overload the flexion movement pattern. So the 4-step progression for flexion exercises is knee raises, followed by leg raises, followed by hanging leg raises, and lastly, cable ab pull downs. And now let's move on to 4 levels for training rotation, which will help train the obliques, which is the side of your abs. The first level is doing the plank hip dip. This is a slightly intensified version of a traditional plank. Instead of just maintaining a plank, you dip the hips to the side so that you train rotation and the obliques get challenged. Once you're able to do 12 repetitions per side, it is time to move on to the next level, and that is diagonal lying floor raises. This is like the leg raise variation I showed you earlier, but you don't move your legs straight up and down, you move them diagonally so that the obliques get challenged. Once you're able to get 12 repetitions per side here, it's time to move on to the pull-up bar and do some hanging oblique raises. This again makes the leg raise more challenging since hanging puts you in a less stable position. Once you can do 12 repetitions per side on the oblique raise, then we can move into a cable wood chop, which will help you progressively overload the obliques long term. When the weight becomes manageable, you can simply increase the weight further to challenge the obliques more. So the 4-step progression starts with a hip dip, then we have diagonal lying leg raises, followed by a hanging oblique raise, and finished off with cable wood chops. And now it's time to move on to the third and final movement pattern that we want to train, and that is stabilization. One of the key functions of your abs is to stabilize the spine. This especially holds true for the transverse abdominis. So training exercises in which we put the abs in a challenging position and then hold that position is also going to be effective for training stabilization, and therefore effective for training your abs. The first level I suggest is doing a modified hollow hold. You keep your legs and arms elevated, which should result in an isometric contraction in your abs. Once you can hold this position for 15 seconds, it is time to transition to the next progression, and that is doing a traditional hollow body hold in which you extend the legs and arms, while keeping them slightly off the floor. This makes the exercise more challenging. Once you can do the hollow body hold for 15 seconds, it is time to transition into a weighted hollow hold in which you hold a dumbbell or plate in your arms to intensify the movement. The progression after this is doing an ab wheel rollout. Once you need to use such heavy weights that it's no longer practical to do a hollow body hold, the ab wheel rollout is a great next step in training abdominal stabilization. So you now know the 3 different types of movement patterns that you need to train for proper abdominal training, and you also know different levels of intensity that you can use in your training. Start with the level that suits your current fitness best and work up from there. A simple way you can incorporate these abdominal exercises in your routines by training 1 abdominal movement pattern per week. So if you have a 3-day full body routine, perform 3 sets of 1 abdominal exercise at the end of each workout. This way you have 9 sets of abdominal training in your workout week. In combination with the compound movements in your training like a squat and deadlift, your abs will get sufficient stimulation and grow. And that was all for today's video. I hope you have a more clear idea on how you can go about training your abs more effectively. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, leave me a thumbs up if you found this video helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And I look forward to seeing you in that next video.